I should say, if I haven't as a setup, Dow didn't accept responsibility for this disaster they caused, and so he decided, I'll go on BBC and accept responsibility as a company. Can you hear?
The factory still exists here, and that's been a real problem for people living here locally. And it's full of toxic waste. People who are living in these houses, we've all got a story to tell about that day 20 years ago. Many of them lost members of their family, and they say that they're continuing to suffer because of the tragedy. They're saying somebody needs to answer for this. Legally, what they're saying is they want to pursue the company to try and clean up the site. But whether the company will accept liability seems doubtful.
Well, John, it's live from Paris now. It's Judith Estera, the spokesman for Dow Chemicals, which took over Union Carbide. Good morning to you. A day of commemoration in Bhopal. Do you now accept responsibility for what happened?
Steve, yes. Today is a great day for all of us at Dow, and I think for millions of people around the world as well. It's 20 years since the disaster, and today I'm very, very happy to announce that for the first time, Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe. We have a $12 billion plan to finally, at long last, fully compensate the victims, including the 120,000 who may need medical care for their entire lives, and to fully and swiftly remediate the Bhopal plant site. Now, when we acquired Union Carbide 3 years ago, we knew what we were getting, and it's worth $12 billion. $12 billion. We have resolved to liquidate Union Carbide, this nightmare for the world and this headache for Dow, and use the $12 billion to adequately compensate the victims.
Jude, that's good news that you have finally accepted responsibility. Some people would say too late. It's 3 years, and almost 4 years on.
When we acquired Union Carbide, we did settle their liabilities in the United States immediately. And we are now, 3 years later, prepared to do the same.
So this is an example of what we call identity correction. It's one way of working, where we pretend to be from a very powerful company and give a presentation of what they should be doing. It's definitely what they're not going to do, because Dow would never accept responsibility for this. And in fact, in this case, afterward, of course, this performance, in which he did live on the BBC broadcast, forced Dow to deny it. And so they come out and say, no, we're not doing the right thing. So this is a kind of way of performance filmmaking where we take on and become the enemy. We become our target. In this case, it's a very powerful company. And we do the thing that they should be doing, but they're not doing. So that's one way of working, which is called identity correction. And what's the next video? Okay, so this is another way of working. This is a mode I call utopian. So the first mode, identity correction, we become our enemies. In this mode, and we kind of do a version of what they should be doing because they're not doing the right thing. In this mode, we are completely, we just dream of the world that we actually want to make true. And in this case, we created a fake edition of the New York Times, and on one day, printed thousands of copies across New York City, and one day distributed at subways and in the public on the streets outside the real New York Times. And it was a paper that looked just like the real New York Times and took on all of the trappings of the real newspaper, but it was all the news that we wanted to see. This is another way of working too, as an example, so we'll play a few minutes of this one.
We needed a really ambitious plan, because all we ever read in the newspapers was how we needed to put everything back on track, back to how it was before it fell apart. But how it was the problem. We needed to show what real change would look like. So together with a whole lot of friends, we would blanket our own newspaper. We'd call it the New York Times. Except our New York Times would be a little bit different. Ours would be set 6 months in the future. It would show what could happen if we set our imagination free.
Things have gotten pretty bad, and I think it's hard for people to imagine the world working another way, so we're trying to, as realistically as possible, present this world as it could be.
They just noted the proof of the New York Times, and it looks unfucking really good.
The obvious question, how the heck did you do it? And you want to start, how long were you working on this thing, and how many of you?
Well, there were a lot of us. It wasn't just the Yes Men, it was a large group of people. We were just one of many groups. It was an idea that sparked a lot of people's imaginations. They wanted to see this happen. And that's sort of the message of the paper as well, is that, great, we elected Obama, and that's fantastic, but now the real work begins.
About something that was optimistic that says we can do all these things. Why not? We created the system that we have now, so why not create a good one instead?
Wow. This is a big day. 7 a.m. rush hour. This is the time to get the papers out there. 3 times. Special issue. Special issue.
What?
National Health Insurance Act passes.
True.
Sorry, the video is a little out of audio sync. This is just an example of trying to give people the idea of hope. Like, if you can give an idea of things can be very different, it's like a first step to actually changing things. Yeah, so we'll see if the sync on this is good. I think this is another example of a different way of working. The first is identity correction, and then we have this utopian way where we just say, you know what, things are crappy, the whole world is frustrating and there's problems everywhere, so what if we pretend just for a very short period of time that things are the way we want to make them. That's a kind of utopian way of working. And this way of working, many groups have done this before, but we have done it too. It's called Dilemma. And the idea is we have a performance we want to do. We should do it in the public in a way that makes the authorities, however they react to it, they lose. So in this case, this is an example from Ivan Marovic. He led a student group in Serbia called Otpor, and they overthrew dictator Slobodan Milosevic in the early 2000s. So, just a second, can you pause? He called it a dilemma action, and we have replicated this. And it's where you just do a silly performance, and it's very simple and there's nothing elaborate, it's very cheap. But it makes, however the opponent reacts to it, they don't look good.
Together with apathy, the biggest enemy of social movement and the biggest ally of the regime. Humor is important to lower fear. Lowering fear is important to increase participation. We go into the street, we put like a big barrel in the middle of the street. And it's Milosevic's picture is on the barrel. There is a texting money for Milosevic's retirement. Please insert the coin. And there was a baseball bat next to the barrel. And it said, if because of Milosevic's economic policies you don't have a coin, bang the barrel. After 15 minutes, there were 100 people around the barrel banging.
Equality. And so this is a version of the dilemma action that we do, where we do a funny performance, but it compels the police, the real police, to become performers in our performance. We kind of, through the design of it, make them become a part of it, even if they don't want to. So this is an example.
I gotta pay bank fees like you. I see corporations getting money handed to them, and the CEOs making $5-6 million after they took money to bail them out. That pisses me off too, man. Come on.
Since even the cops are fed up, maybe they should join a protest.
Hey, are you using those pizza boxes to sleep on, or oh, okay. We want to make signs.
Oh, that you can read them.
Yeah?
They're done with sleeping.
Oh, okay.
Huddle, everybody. Okay, huddle. All right, so this is the deal. We are going on a broker's march. We try to get police to go with us. We're doing a direct action that is highly risky and irresistible. Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Get the ball! Wall Street is our street! Wall Street is our street! Wall Street is our street! Wall Street is our street! Wall Street is our street! Wall Street is our street!
As we walked, more and more police stood up to make sure we didn't cause trouble.
It's our street! Wall Street! Police for the occupation! Represent police for the occupation! Represent police for the occupation! Represent police for the occupation! It's our pension slip! It's our pension slip! It's our pension slip! It's our pension slip!
Yeah, so that's an example where if it's not clear in the scenario, we just knew that if 50 people started marching down the street with hidden signs, the police would follow because they're just keeping peace. And we knew that if we turn over signs at a certain moment that say, they're with us, they're gonna have to be with us, even though they're not. And then what they published then was a front page image of someone holding a sign that said, police supporting the occupation. So we kind of mischievously brought them in to our protests, in effect, even though they had nothing to say about it. So this is a mode of working where we just create a performance where they are forced to become performers for us. And because we can expect how they're going to react. What's the next one? So this is the final example. Turn the story around and make different people feel what it's like to be in a, to have the shoe on the other foot, sort of. In this case, this is just a piece of the film that we showed at the festival called The Peace Pipeline. This is an early work in progress, but in this example, and it's very uncomfortable because it's a little like, I don't know how to just say, like, it's edgy because it is involving real people who don't know a performance is about to happen, but we feel it's worth it because of what it says and what it reveals about what they think. In this case, in the US, they were building Line 3 that is still a source of a big fight. And Line 3 is a pipeline that will go through Native American land and kind of destroy it. And they even kind of specifically decide that the pipeline goes through their land because it's not valuable to white Americans. And so what we did, which is in the film, was just reverse all the logic of it so that we didn't pose as some company we're not. We kind of pretended we were the oil pipeline company, but we just said, we are the Indigenous Pipeline Council. We are an Indigenous-owned pipeline company. And then we went to places that we knew that white Americans would be white Americans generally of a kind of wealth status who support the pipeline. And we just wanted to give them a little, very brief taste of what it feels like if the pipeline went through their backyard. And so in this case, we went to a church where they were letting out the service to do a performance that was, the whole idea came around the idea that this pipeline often will go through Native American land, including sacred burial grounds.
I love cooking here.
I'm just grateful to the equal opportunity hiring policy of Sacred Remains Relocation Service. I'm just glad that worked. I was dealing with dead people, but on a less professional basis. 1, 2, 3, Sacred!
Hello? Where are you guys on the phone from?
That's life in the Sacred Remains relocation business. Sometimes you're moving ancestors around, people, you want to see your paperwork, you're just here to do a job. It's about industry, it's about energy. And sometimes it's better to, ask for forgiveness afterwards.
As their mass lets out, just so we can get some more of the residents to see the process of sacred remains relocation, which our crew are going to demonstrate today. How carefully and respectfully we remove sacred remains that have to be displaced by the pipeline.
What's this all about? What's this all about? What is this all about?
Oh, we're part of a pipeline company, the contract by Enbridge. So we're gonna have to move some remains for the pipeline that's coming in. Oh yeah, no, we have permission. We have eminent domain from Enbridge. So Enbridge got eminent domain because they're rerouting their pipeline up here. Oh, you want to talk to the person? Oh, here's Dr.
But what I'm saying is that this happens on reservations. They remove bodies or they just plow over them into the pipeline. I understand. I completely understand. But in the name of the economy and pipelines, guys, good job. Thank you very much. All right, we should probably head out. We have 3 more cemeteries to hit in the county. Let's go. Let's put this pipeline through.
So it's very uncomfortable, but it does honestly reveal in people's reactions how they feel about it. Like, of course, we're fine with supporting a pipeline that destroys native sacred sites, but don't even bother us with a silly joke on a Sunday, like even for a split second. So this is an example of a reversal. And the next one. This is just a brief interlude to say that the whole mode of working that I adopt and that the Yes Men have worked with taps into this idea of tricksterism. I don't know if the word translates exactly, but the idea is that there are, it's a human cultural archetype, basically, of like all throughout history, across all cultures, there's this figure that, at least in English, we call trickster, which there's also many different words for it. This is Renaud from the US. Yeah, and this is Coyote. It's a Native American trickster character. So they are like a literary and cultural archetype that we like tapping into. And there's a few things about the trickster that are worth mentioning, because I think it relates to some of the examples of the films that we make. One of the things is that they don't have specific morals, but they only are about using the lack of power against power. So we would say punch up. They use very low resources, very simple tactics, kind of like the dilemma action, to confront very powerful opponents. And that's the main theme of Trickster, is maybe sometimes they use humor, but also they just use like creativity to outwit their opponents. And in our case, often the opponents are companies or governments that are doing something we want to change. And this whole mode of working is accepting that it doesn't require great resources when you use a trickster approach. Approach is actually all about being in a position of very little power, especially when we're talking about companies. In many examples, like Dow Chemical Company is a company with billions of dollars. Like, we could never, there's no competing with their resources. But what we can do is compete with their stories and the stories they tell, sometimes by becoming them. And so the trickster is a bit of a shapeshifter. It's being okay with short-term deception, creative deception, and even taking on all of the costumes and the trappings of like the kind of clothes and appearance of our enemies. And part of the reason I find that really important is that we have all different levels of privilege. Like, I'm a straight white man, so that gives me privilege in certain places, especially in the corporate world. And so what we do is try to use the privilege that is inherent in an oppressive structure against itself. So Mike and Andy, the original Yes Men, are also white men. And so their way of performing is to just put on a suit and to become the appearance of a powerful, basically the people we're trying to criticize and attack. And in so doing, the idea is that we are also making fun of the fact that we have such privilege. I think a good example to talk about in terms of the production of these films is they're actually very, very cheap and scrappy. Like, there's no resources almost. It's like very independent filmmaking that has almost no power behind it, except in its creativity. Even the suits, like when Andy goes on the BBC and speaks as Dow Chemical, that morning they went to a cheap thrift store and bought a crappy suit, like a bad suit. Like they don't even own good suits. And that's part of the point, I think, because in putting on a terrible suit and still getting on the BBC is a way of making satire about the BBC and the structures that give a white man that kind of power. And the reason that I talk about Trickster is because it's, of course, it's like universal, it's like human. And so everyone has different privileges, different powers, different relationships to like the cultural context that they're in. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so like I said, like I'm a white man, Andy and Mike are white men. That doesn't mean the only way to adopt trickster is by being in our particular case. We, given our position of privilege, use the thing, like we go after the people like us because that's a special power that they unfortunately have given us. Gitz and Tito from Peace Pipeline, they're not white men. They have a very different relationship to power, and so they do it differently, but it's still very similar. And I think it's important to note that the mode is accessible, like anyone can become trickster, despite different levels of power and different cultural contexts. We come from like corporate America, and so we're going after corporate America and the privileges that it gives white men. And next one. This is just another note of like the whole ethos behind what we do is that we are, you know, as filmmakers and cultural storytellers, we are, and who are concerned about social issues, we are obviously in a story fight. Like that's kind of what politics is, and at least it's the way that storytellers engage with politics is through stories. Otpor, the group from Serbia, had some very interesting thoughts about this, but we can talk about it later if it makes sense. The next slide. Yeah, I just talked about this, which is, of course, like, Andy and Mike from the Yes Men are very good performers. I'm not such a good performer. I'm an introvert, so I don't want to be like Gitz and Tito are great performers. So they're very good at being out in front of the camera. I'm like a secret behind the scenes kind of person, and that's okay. I think it's important to mention in the production of these films and in these videos, everyone can become a part of it, and the way we adapt the different talents that come together to make a production like this is to find the things that fit your comfort level. It also obviously relates to your cultural context, like things that we might do in America we wouldn't do in France, or we wouldn't do in Turkey, or all of the context matters, obviously. But it doesn't mean that it changes the underlying point, or like spirit of it. Next one. Yeah, so I think the last example I'll give is just a recent project, it's very recent from September. This is a work in progress film of a project me and my collaborator did in Paris. The background, I think, is a little important, is that again, this is a pipeline project. There's a pipeline that is going to be built through East Africa, through some of the most beautiful ecosystems in the world. So we did a project with organizations in collaboration about that. Yeah, so I think that's good. So we can play this one. This one's a bit longer. I don't know how we are for time, it's okay. So this one's maybe about 10 minutes long. Is it still okay? Okay, so we'll play this one.
This is the East African crude oil pipeline being developed by Total Energies, the standard bearer of responsible energy. We'll begin by importing keystone species from East Africa. Say bonjour to Reza. To welcome her, my friend François, the rooster.
We came to Paris because we heard about a pipeline project that is in East Africa. It's called EACOP, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, and the company that's behind it is a French company called Total.
It's
makes me feel helpless. It makes me feel like someone is going to grab what belongs to us.
I have lost totally oil activities, and all these have been caused by that. My family situation is bad with hunger. My children are no longer going to school because of the 6 acres of land that was sold to use by the oil company. Intimidation was very, very, very high. They came at our place here several times. Those Atacama, Petroleum Authority, Total, to intimidate us, to sign and to force us to sign.
Those oil companies come and destroy our crops.
Why have been forced to leave my land?
The pipeline is 1,443 meters long. It's going to be absolutely ecologically devastating. But the interesting thing about Total is that they are spending an enormous amount of money convincing people that they are a sustainable energy company. Meanwhile, they are running a giant crude oil pipeline through some of the most pristine ecosystems in the entire world. And there's just no way to make sense of that. And so we're here to help them be a little bit more honest.
Some oil company hired some wildlife people, like it was just like, just them being like, not even the top tier, like zoo handlers.
Yeah, have the guy say to a few people, I usually deal with hippos. This is, I'm stretching out something here. We're really gonna make some people freak out. It's gonna be great. I mean, it's really, it'll definitely get people's attention, that's for sure.
My group has invented an organization that those females are from. Does that make sense? No. So the Habitat Project does not actually exist. It's satire. It's a way for us to speak about all of the damage that's being done by the pipeline and do it in a funny, satirical, media-grabby way to get the story out and also to pressure the banks to not finance this pipeline. Oh my God. Towards the end of the presentation, there is going to be a very theatrical climax involving some animals. Ooh, no, they're fake. They look real. No, they're not. And that's going to be a very symbolic moment for imperial wreckage and disaster and life loss that will happen because of the pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Yeah, that's good. It's an incredibly imperialistic project that they're doing. And so what better place than announcing it inside a Napoleonic ballroom in Paris?
The press are going to fill the ballroom, they're going to hear the presentation from our two actors, and one of them is representing Rehabitat as an executive, and the other one is representing East Africa.
And meanwhile, we'll be sending out a series of press releases that look very much like they're from the real Total. to thousands of French and international press, letting them know about the plan. And we have a Twitter account that is activating to let the world who can't be in the room know about this incredible plan.
This is the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, or ECOP, from Hoima, Uganda to the port of Tanga in Tanzania. ECOP will unlock East Africa's economic potential. However, the pipeline runs through vibrant ecosystems. The East African Crude Oil Pipeline cannot avoid its ports, nor can we reduce its impact. I'm very proud to introduce Rehabitat, the very first habitat equivalency assisted migration project. Rehabitat will save animals by moving them out of the way to a safer place right here in France. This pipeline offers us for the first time the incredible opportunity to tap the energy riches of East Africa with a clear conscience. How will it work? Well, first, Rehabitat's ecology and innovation team works with climate models to predict French ecological zones that will transition due to climate change towards the subtropical conditions, mimicking conditions around the East African pipeline corridor. Please meet the SV Rehabitats, our 200-meter wind and solar-powered carbon-neutral cargo ship. Wildlife enjoy passage in comfortable transitional habitats aboard the vessel that also offsets the CO2 impacts of the ECOP project. Rehabitat employs former agriculturists relocating from their homes along the pipeline route to be sanitation specialists, handlers, and morale monitors aboard the SV Rehabitat, completing the total compensation strategy. I am honored to introduce my colleague, Mr. Keil Balonga.
Bonjour et bienvenue à tous. Dans cette cage se trouve mon ami Reza, un oiseau canao à joues argentées, qui vit dans la région qui abritera bientôt l'oléoduc d'Afrique de l'Est. Au nom des peuples de l'Ouganda et de la Tanzanie, et bien évidemment au nom de Reza, nous apportons notre soutien inconditionnel au projet Rehabitat. On vous remercie.
Everybody, say bonjour to Reza. And here to welcome her, my friend François, the rooster, national bird of France, and these two species will cohabitate for the first time in history thanks to Rehabitat. François, say jump. I'm very sorry. You can find more information on our website. Sorry for that. Thanks for coming. I'm very sorry. Please just check the website and details. Maybe we can define your way out at this point. Maybe you could, yeah, it's okay. We're very sorry about it.
À l'origine de ce happening satirique, des activistes du groupe américain des Fixers, proches des Yes Men, un collectif de militants qui dénonce le libéralisme par les canulars. Ici, tout est faux. Le film, tout comme les attachés de presse, la plupart des journalistes évoquent au pupitre un comédien qui joue un responsable en tout total. Le projet fait l'objet de vives critiques de la part d'ONG qui dénoncent un impact majeur sur l'environnement et sur les populations locales. Elles ont assigné la multinationale en justice pour manquement à son devoir de vigilance.
On parle de plus de 100 000 personnes qui sont aujourd'hui affectées par le projet Tilonga et par l'oléoduc ECOP en Ouganda et en Tanzanie.
So this action did make a bloody splash and maybe temporarily embarrass Total for their absurd hypocritical greenwashing. But the truth is they're still barreling forward trying to make ECOP, and it's really important that we all keep on the pressure against them and on the banks that are considering financing ECOP. So that was an example of a recent project. So if it's not clear, the idea was we compelled the media with all these projects to pay attention to what they're not doing by giving them a symbol, a visual image that is impossible not to write about. In this case, Total, this company, now it got a huge amount of attention in the media in France. Now Total has to repeatedly deny that they're going to kill birds when they build this pipeline, that they're going to kill anything. So it creates a totally absurd, fake extrapolation of the way they think, of their logic, in order to haunt them in the popular imagination. With some projects like this, definitely with Peace Pipeline, and I expect with this one too, at different points as this company is moving forward to try to create this pipeline, this story will come back. These things, the whole approach through the films that we make of these projects is to create a popular image. It's like counter advertising. Like we could never compete with their advertising budgets, but what we can do is create images that compete with their greenwashing. And so it's very hard. This is the importance of it being emotional and humorous, which is, of course, whatever Total says when they're building this pipeline, they will say, we also invest in different things. They will say all kinds of things. But at the same time, it's very hard to forget, like, oh, in a public press event, Total murdered a bird by accident. Even though it's fake, it will still stick in the brain in a kind of way as a funny memory, and it's emotional, it's disturbing. All of the people in the room were real journalists who were invited to come, and they all thought we were Total. So during that moment, all of the audience is completely real press, and they really think we're doing a ridiculous plan. In this case, I'm not sure if it's clear, but the idea was if we could become Total and then make a plan around, it's easier for us to bring like Noah's Ark, 2 of every animal out of Africa than it is to not make this pipeline. It just creates a cultural story that is easy to latch onto. And when they write about a dumb kind of prank like this, they are in so doing writing about ECOP, the pipeline, which is the opposite of what Total wants. So the whole approach of all of this trickster filmmaking is the idea of we need to do the things that our opponents don't want us to do, which is to make people pay attention to what they're actually doing. So even though it's a kind of lying, it's also a kind of truth-telling. We're trying to be honest. We're doing the honest thing that they're actually not doing themselves. Is there more? I forget. No, that's it. Yeah. So I guess, yeah, if we have questions or if there's anything clear. Is there anything I didn't make clear, I guess?
Thank you very much. We can have 10-15 minutes of Q&A. And our crew is Rütkeşat Didrikson. You have translation if needed. 15 dakika soru cevap yapabiliriz. Festival ekibinden Rütkeşat Didrikson çevrede yardımcı olabilir.
Yani sorusu olan varsa ve İngilizce sonları zorluk çekiyorsa zaten sadece herhalde yardım ederim. Onun dışında yani İngilizce soracaksınız zaten bana gerek yok.
Ekiplerinden hiç tutuklanan oldu mu?
Anybody arrested from your team while they were in
No, not arrested, not for any good reasons, only for dumb ones, like a bicycle ticket or something. Yeah, it's a common question. I think, like, are there repercussions for doing this kind of thing? And I think generally the all of the opponents that we go up against, they know better. Like, they shouldn't arrest us. It's part of, like, it being a dilemma. You create a dilemma where, like, I hope they arrest us, but if they do, then they become part of the performance, and they become part of the film too. It lives on, like, they know they're being filmed, which is a thing I didn't mention too much about this work too. But yeah, we film it all, which is a key thing too. Like, it's visible, yeah, which also makes it harder to arrest someone.
Soruyu hiç ekiplerinden düzeltmemiş olan var mı diye bir soru geldi. Yani burada sadece aptal ve saçma nedenlerle ya da işte küçük, mesela bisikletle ilgili bir şey söylüyor. Bisikleti yanlışlıkla ifade edildi. Bilmiyorum, o şekilde bir şey vardı. Onun dışında ne dediğini ben şimdi bilmedim de zaten daha yani yapmamaları gerektiğini de bilerek davranıyorlar değil mi? Birini özelliğini mi? Ben yeri kaçırdım. Keşfettik o zaman. Yani ya da zaten de eğer bilema gösterdi, hani polisler normalde onların her şey sakin, iyi gidiyor mu diye polisler yanlarına geldikten sonra pankart açıp polisler de bizimle pankart açıp dedikleri taktiklerinden dilema olur dedikleri, değil mi? Öyle bir şey. Kusura bakmayın, ben aslında onlara son dakikada söyleyemedim. Bu benim için çok, yani ben her şeyden öte gülmekten çok acı çekiyorum. Benim hayatım biraz, benim eşim yaban konuşamıyorum işte. Yerli olduğu için Amerikan yerlisi. Yani benim burada gördüğümüz bir şeyi ben yaşadım ve benim hayatım çok etkilendiği için benim biraz kafam gitti. Ama yardım ettiğinde gel kaçırdım yani. I'm sorry, I was just explaining. Your topic is actually, your talk is very intense for me, and even though I also get the humor, I'm also very saddened because we're living with this with my husband. So I'm explaining to him I wanted to escape from this Q&A help, but I said yes to my brother, and for me it is so big of a topic, and I'm living in it because of it. Başka bir şey yani yapabilirsiniz. Ben çeviremediysem, ben dediğim gibi her şeyi kaydettiğiniz için bir de dedim, pardon, o var bir dedi, hep filmi çekiyoruz dedi, videoyu aldığımız için dedi, zaten yani gözaltı gibi bir durum yaşanmıyor diye bir şey. Başka soru var mı? Birisi benim almak isterse bu arada alsın artık. Burada sahneden bunu sağlık öyle bir sorayım ya da istiyorsanız yardım edebilirsiniz. Ya da bu şekilde oturduğunuz yerden de derseniz çok memnun olurum. Var mı başka soru? Ya da sunuşu, hani İngilizce oldu ya sunuş. Bir şey yani hiç takip edememiş, İngilizce bilmeyen seyircilere söyleyeyim. Hani bir şey merak ettiğiniz bir şey varsa, anlamadığınızda genel olarak herhangi bir video ile ilgili bir sormak istediğiniz bir şey varsa belki öyle de olabilir. Öyle bir şey söyleyebilirsiniz belki.
Yani İngilizce bilmeyen için ben bilmiyorum mesela. Başa başladım ama bunu tam olarak kavrayamadım. Yani genel hatlarıyla biliyorum. Mustafa arkadaşımız anlatırız ama şöyle bir özet geçerseniz en azından bilmeyenler için konuyu
yani genel olarak egemen gücü elinde bulunduran, diyelim ki ırkçılıktasar konser zaman bir beyaz egemenlikler nasıl özellikle Amerika'da gücü elinde bulunduran, işte Amerika'yı elinde bulunduran ve bizim işte hoş bir rahatsızlıkların merkezi sayılabilecek güç merkezlerine yaptıklarının daha duyulur olması ve onlara karşı bir eleştirel bir şey yapmak adına bir takım grupları var ve o gruplar içinde çeşitli eylem modelleri geliştirmişler. I'm just explaining because some people didn't get anything from your because of the language. I'm making a summary.
Can you add? I wanted to say to what you said. I think part of the importance is actually using humor as a survival tool. Like, it is heavy. It's so heavy, but we use humor like when it's dark and it's important. Yeah.
Burada şimdi hemen çevireyim yoksa gene unutabilirim. Dedi ki bu arada hep böyle vurguladığı şey var ya, mizah. Mizah zaten hep biliyorsunuz önemsenir, hayatta kalmak için. Onlarla diyor, bu çok önemli bir vurgu, bilgi. Yani hayatta kalmak için bunlar ağır konular. Bir tane eylem yapınca değişmeyecek dünya ama o şeyi kendi hayatta kalma mekanizması olarak önemsiyoruz gibi. Şeyleri sonuçtan söz edersek, birincide mesela videosu gösterdi. Kimlikle ilgili bir şeydi o. Mesela büyük bir şirket dedi, diyelim bir yerde bir Hindistan'da petrol sıkıntısı neden olmuşlar ama çıkıp da biz bunu karşılıyoruz sorumluluğunu demiyorlar. Onu bile yapmıyorlar diyelim. O zaman dedi biz bazen onların yerine geçiyoruz ve tamamen çok da iyi bir donanım damında yapıyorlar bayağı bir ekip falan. Onlardan değilmiş gibi sahte web sitesi açıp o şirketmiş gibi BBC de bunları görüyor web sitesinden 20. yılı o sızıntını onlarla iletişime geçiyor ve BBC çağırdığı aslında çağrılan ve giden kişi sahte. O şeyden değil, şirketten değil. Ama orada gidip mesela biz sorumluluğu alıyoruz, şu kadar bir dolarımız tüm masrafları verdiğimiz zarar için. Aslında bu yapılmıyor ama göstermek için. Yani bunu yapmalısınız. So you do that, for example, the identity and everything because you want the people to do what like the video show. Yes, we take the responsibility, but you don't. So in the cases of many cases that they don't, that was one of the examples. You show up like, yes, man, yeah, we take the responsibility. This is actually what they should do.
Power becoming our
Kendi düşmanları olarak yaptıkları. Bunlar kendi çalışma yöntemleri anlattılar. Çok güzel. Belki biz de bazıları kullanabilirsiniz diye de. Diğeri bir tanesi New York tamamen umut için demişti. Mesela New York Times gazetesini tamamen sahte ve iyi haberlerle yapmışlardı. O da umut içinde de başka ne diyordu ona? O aslında Ütopya demişti. Evet, Ütopya. So your New York Times was Utopia and for all. Eğer çok umudu görürsek değiştirmeye dair umut çok önemli bir aşama demişti. Utopia. Yani bir şeyi değiştirebileceğimiz olan yani onu düşünmek, onun gücü öyle demişti. O gazetede görmüştüm videoda insanlar şaşırıyordu. Bir tanesi dilemmaydı. O Sırbistan'dan bir örnekti. Yani bu diktatörden bahsediyordu o insan. O diktatör yani iyi kazanıyorsanız buraya bir para atın ama paranız yoksa iyi kazanmıyorsanız şu varile vurun. Herkes varile vurmaya başlıyor. Polisler geliyor bir noktadan sonra bunu sona erdirmek için ne yapacaklar? Varile alıyorlar. I explained it, but I forget it was called dilemma. Okay.
However they react, they become our performance.
Ne yaparsa yapsınlar oradaki bir yani onların gösterisi bir parçası oluyorlar. Bu yaptıkları eylem tarzı belirledikleri zaman.
We force them to be actors for us.
Bizim bizim için sanki oyuncumuz olmalarına zorluyoruz onları gibi. Çok sevdiğim bir tanesi o en son da ben onu izlemedim. Şimdi bir tane anlatayım, sonra bir tane kaçırdığım var. Bir tanesi zıt, yani başkasına yapılan şeyi kendinize yapılıyor gibi davranmak, reversal. Mesela şimdi boru hattı geçiyor. O filmi izlerseniz Kings Park'tan zaten onunla ilgili. Boru hattı geçerken yerlerin böyle beyaz için önemsiz alanlarından böyle geçiriyorlar. Pek bir şey düşünmeden önlerine mezarlık bile gelse mezarların yeri değiştirip üstünden geçiriyor. Hiçbir anlam önemi yok. Bunun aynısını beyazlara yapsa, beyazların da olsa ne olur diye bir mesela bir klip vardı. Biliyorsunuz kiliseden çıkıyorlar böyle bakıyorlar, tabutlar düşüyor yerde. Onlar diyorlar ki yalan atarak. Bu arada yalan söyleyerek iyi yapmak. Başı böyledir. Yani yalanı da tabii ki yani yalanı şey yapacak halimiz yok ama bu yalanın da bu eylemlerdeki gücü o şekilde yani gerçeği anlatmak. Orada mesela kabuklar üstünde birileri bunlarla onları anlatıyor. Hani biz bu hani oluyor ya Stalingrad falan diyor. Bazıları ne diyordu? İşte ay bu bari bugün olmasaydı yani bir pazar günü çıktık şeyden ayinden hani durduruyoruz ne yapıyorsunuz? Orada da aslında bu belki de en this is one of the most intense to make the people really react as they are. Ama yani onların o tepkisini görmek adına yine de önemli. Ama o en sertlerinden biri bilmiyorum siz öyle düşünüyorsunuz. Gerçek insanların gerçek tepkisini görüyorsunuz ama orada sen yerinde benim yerimde sen olsaydın o şekilde yapıyor. Bir tane daha vardı. Polisler. Hayır ben öyle bilince size durdurmadığım için anlatayım. Polisli olan en iyiydi aslında. Onu anlamayan olduysa belki yani polisler düşünün bir şey başlıyorlar eyleme. Bir noktadan sonra eylemin yanında olup hani güven bir şey olmasın çevreye. Amerika'da böyle güvenlik duygusuyla sağlamak adına yürürken birden onların elindeki pankartta polisler de birisinden bir pankart olunca onlar da doğrudan eylemin içinde oluyorlar. Bir de böyle yani bunlar eylem yöntemlerini anlattı. Bence dediğim gibi biz de yapalım yani. Bence muhteşem. So I just made a little summary of it. Okay.
I did that English because I don't speak Turkish. I'm very curious because I assume you submit your work in many different festivals. I'm curious about the reaction of countries or continents. They understand, appreciate your humor when you work.
Like different.
How they react, like as Turkey do. Understand.
Yeah, the cultural context is
Yes.
very different all the time. Like it's very different doing something in France versus originally we were going to do something about this pipeline in East Africa, but they said no, we shouldn't. We should do it not only where the company is, but also we shouldn't do that kind of thing. So there are also places where we wouldn't do this kind of filmmaking performance either. Yeah, like there are some places where it's not the useful thing. Yeah.
But humor-wise.
Yeah, oh, well, humor-wise, it's kind of, I guess all of the context is so important, so that's important, but everyone understands the importance of like handling a very serious thing, but in a fun way, or just not as serious. Like maybe it's dark, but it's not like heavy. We aren't like, but it's also like I was saying, it's like she was saying, like it's a survival tool, like just to, part of the power of becoming our enemies is like making fun of them. Like if we put on a clown version of them, it's a little bit of like taking some power away from them. So now like Total, as an example, has a very hard time feeling the same way, and just their image of like, we were doing the right thing, we were good, because now there's another image. And so it's like, I think everyone understands the humor is necessary. So like the example from Otpor in Serbia, they maybe don't do something that we would do in America, but they do a version that at its heart is mischief and creating a dilemma through humor. And also like the humor is, like we were saying about being arrested, like it's harder, like traditional resistance, traditional activism, maybe it's easy to arrest protesters. If you're being dumb and silly, like it's a little harder. Like they look worse if they do, and it's really not. They don't see it as serious because we're being playful. But at the same time, like, it can be powerful, even if it gives even if it's just for everyone doing it to feel like, okay, we can keep going. Because if you're feeling only heavy, sad about all the important things, it's very, very hard to keep going. But if you do something fun, okay, maybe you can keep going a little longer.
Biraz uzun oldu ama şöyle baştan sunum olarak festivallere gidiyor, farklı tepkiler, nasıl tepkiler alıyorsunuz? O da mesela Doğu Afrika'da, because East Africa you couldn't do something like. Mesela Doğu Afrika'da bazı bir çalışmasını, o totalle ilgili olanı galiba, orada işte belki onu göstermiş. Tabii ki farklar olduğunu söyledi. Genel olarak zaten bahsederken mizahın hep ağır olan şeyleri biraz daha hafiflettiğini söyledi ve bunun da karşı tarafa geçtiğini söyledi. Lütfen benim biraz uzun oldu çünkü. Yani onun mizahın bir anlamda karşılıklı bir anlaşabildiği, anlaşma yaratabildiğini söyledi. Ve şeyle ilgili de yani tutuklanma açısından da belki ciddi olarak yapılsa gerçekten normal bir eylem. O zaman gözaltına alınmanın falan daha kolay olabileceğini ama değil mi? Öyle söyledi. Şey olursa işte aptalca şeyler falan işte bir palyaço bilmem ne. Yani biraz o tarz bir şekilde yapıldığı zaman ve saçma sapan hareketlerle orada o zaman zaten daha zor gözaltına alınmak dedi. Böyle bir
I mean, the media in the US was always globalized, especially in the early 2000s, 9/11 and invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. But the idea of fake news and falsehood was not that heavy. It's not that central. Now we are always doing tricky stuff, in quotations, fake news, maybe. How does the post-truth era affect your works?
That's a good question.
Yeah. 2000'lerin başında yani Amerikan medyası zaten genel olarak yalan söylemeye çok meyilli. Özellikle 2000'lerin başında 11 Eylül saldırıları olduktan sonra Irak'ta sevilen insanlar diye CNN bir video paylaşmıştı ve o video aslında 90'lardan bir düğün sonrası sevilen Iraklıların videosuydu. Ama işte Iraklar sevildi ve işte orayı işgal etmemiz gibi bir videoydu. Yani bu hep var belki ama son 5-10 yıldır sahte haber yani hakikat sonrası bu medyada çok hasta olmaya başladı. Bir anlamda yaptıkları işlerle çelişir gibi, onların alanına girer gibi oldu. Bununla nasıl başa çıkıyorlar demeye çalışıyorum. Bakalım, hoşuma gitti.
Well, first, the difference is the intention. Like fake news is actually to deceive, so trick you. We actually always tell total truth, except that we really work for the company. So the only lie is that we're not real, but everything we say about the issues is real, which changes the intention. But also the fake is very, very short. So it's maybe not even one day. It's very, very brief. And that's very different because real fake news is never supposed to be revealed. It's supposed to stay fake. These projects, the whole point of doing it, the only reason to do it is for the reveal. We reveal the truth very quickly. If it doesn't get revealed, it doesn't work. They don't care. The media doesn't write stories about a crazy company doing something and they're wrong. The media writes stories about pranksters pretending to be the company. So the media that comes out of it, like articles, journalism that comes out about it, doesn't write about the fake. That makes sense. Because the whole point of it is to reveal that it was a joke. And if there's no punchline, if there's no reveal punchline, there's no joke. Yeah.
Normally I think I'm too excited. I'm too sorry. And plus I'm losing transport to space with your thing. Why are you laughing by the way?
No, you're doing great.
Yani burada şeyden özellikle bahsettim. Yani şimdi yalan söylüyorlar ama bir tek genelde yalanları da en başta yani kendileri yalan bir varlık olabiliyor ama aslında yaptıkları her şey gerçeği söylemek için ve gerçek de açığa çıkması bayağı salatarak söylüyorum. Açığa çıkması için ama normalde hep bize verilip duran medyada yalan haberlerde açığa doğrunun çıkması diye zaten bir şey yok. Öyle bir amaç yok, bizi zaten zehirliyorlar yalanlarla.
Aslında söylediğiniz her şey doğru ama çok küçük bir bölüm.
Çok küçük ve kısa sürüyor.
Sadece o New York Times muhabiri gerçek değil. Diğer söylediği her şey doğru aslında. Anlattıkları bütün olay doğru.
Çok teşekkür
tek küçük bir bölüm yalan.
Ya spontane çevirde daha hızlı durdurmak gerekiyor. Çok üzüldüm. Neden bugün başaramadık yani? Çok üzüldüm. Yani ben not falan alıyorum normalde. Çünkü ben pek sevmediğim bir şey spontane çeviri. Kaçırdığım bir şey var mı? Yani çok özetle ama ana şey olarak öyle söyledi. Onun dışında başka sorusu olan var mı? Bir de ben küçük bir şey söyleyeceğim. Çünkü ilk başta söylediğim bir gerçekliğine oturtayım diye. Benim eşim, bilmeyenler için söyleyeyim, Amerikan yerlisi, yani bir kabilesinden bir yerli ve yoksul. O yüzden benim Amerikan'da Türkiye'deki genel Amerika çok bağdaşmıyor. Yani bir tanesi bizim azınlıklarımız Amerika'dan yardım ister falan. Oysa Amerika'da böyle bir yerlere böyle şeyler yapıyor. Hatta bunun eşimin Peace Pipeline yönetmeniyle söyleşisini de sonra YouTube'a da koyacağız. İzlersiniz neler söylediklerini hatta bir eyalette hala yerleri öldürseniz neredeyse bir şey olmuyor falan gibi. Hala Colorado galiba. Öyle. İkincisi de ben bilimle ilgilenen birisiyim, biyoloğum. Ve bütün hayatım şeyle geçiyor. Yani biyolojiyle ilgili ne yapmaya çalışırsam işte şu kişi gitmiş Amerika'da okuyor şu an. Amerika'ya gidecek, Amerika'dan döndü. İnanılmaz bir olumlu, bir pozitif ve bilim bir şey oluyor. Ama buna karşın mesela çok kişi bilmiyor ki Amerika kendi vatandaşlarını okutamıyor. Orada yani şeyseniz Türkiye'de gene bir ODTÜ falan belki kazanırsınız durumunuz iyi biri olmasa. Ancak karşı tamam biz bile hala eylem yapıyoruz ama o paralar verilebilir, paralar verirsiniz ama Amerika'da böyle bir üniversite eğitimi yok. Ve bunu bilmiyoruz. Bilmiyoruz, sürekli oraya eğitime gidiyoruz falan. O yüzden benim demek istediğim, ben bunu izlerken hatta bu mezarlık sahnesi, mezarlık kültürünün gerçi doğru, kilise ve şırtalık sahnesinde. Ben o sahnelerde tam çok korku hissediyorum. Çünkü Amerika'da yaşadım. Eşim sırf yüzümün beyaz olmamasının neden olduğunu falan diye gördüm. Ama mesela burada daha çok da gülme şeyi oldu. Tabii ki olur. Çünkü komik. Ama demek istediğim benim bir tarafım çok özür dilerim. Yani bu işi bunu biraz yapamadım. Bir de çok içinde olduğum için çok heyecanlandım. Yani ben Keil'e çok teşekkür ediyorum. Yani onun gibi insanların Amerika'da bunları yapıyor olması benim hayatıma doğrudan olumlu etkiler getirebilir. Ya da getirmese bile bana güç verebilirler. En azından benim hikayemin belki çok çoğunluk Türkiye bilmese de böyle bir Amerika'yı. Benim hikayemin gerçek olduğunu ben orada görüyorum. Çok heyecanlanıyorum. O yüzden kusura bakmayın. Normal şartlarda Türkiye'de benim de kızım orada okuyor cümleleriyle çok karşılaşıp ne diyeceğimi bilemeyen bir insanım. Böyle translate why I really excited was, having a Native American and Korean husband really is that Turkish perception, as I told you, that people don't even know American citizens, poor ones can't get education, but all our Turkish people, especially after bachelor's, they just get sponsorship and just go and live in states and stay there and everything. I explained so that, yeah, okay.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Keil'e, Özgür'e. Şimdi küçük bir anımız olacak. Bir sürprizimiz var. We have a surprise for you. It's a surprise for you. Bu yüzden Uşak İl Kültür Turizm Müdürü sevgili Sabri Ceylan'a ve totem sanatçısı Cino Tedriks'ini sahneye davet ediyorum.
So the Uşak Film Festival would like to present to you this award. In the name of the Raven, all hail the Loki Award. In the cricket culture, our trickster is the raven. Benim kültür o şakacı, gıcık, geyik bir hayvan, o kuzgun. Ve onlar başlıyor arkadaşım. Çünkü çok bir şey istiyor. Ama insanlar hayır diyecek. O zaman kuzenim diyecek. Kuzenim diyecek. Hayır diyecek. Onlar hayır diyecek o kuzgun. Ondan sonra kardeşim lütfen diyor. İşte öyle bizim trickster. In my culture, the raven is a trickster. If he really, really wants something from you, he starts off saying, my friend. In our culture, we don't exactly look at each other. And if you notice, ravens don't look at each other either. But they say, my friend, from the side of their eye. And then they step a little bit closer because people will tell them no. Everybody knows how the raven is. And they'll tell him no, but he'll step a little bit closer and he'll say, cousin, please. And they'll say no, no, because they know how big of a trickster that raven is. So he'll say, brother, to help out. So here we go.
Kuzgun, hareket kültürünün numaracı hayvanı. O yüzden kuzgun onuruna ve Loki'yi kutsayarak öldürüyorlar. Loki de biliyorsunuzdur İskandinav mitolojisinde kurnazlık, hazırlık tanrısı. Biz de o yüzden bunu verdik. Gösteri 8-10 gece olacak. 8-10 gece YouTube boyutu izleyeceğiz. Çok teşekkürler. Aramız var.